There's Marvin Gaye, and he was telling us about saving the children. And as a matter of fact, I have here in the studio Kathy Brown, and she's into saving the children. She has her own unique way of educating little tots or educating parents from the cradle, literally from birth right through until they go off to school. Kathy, I noticed in your little brochure that you've got what's called family grouping. You know, that's sort of unusual in the school system. People are grouped according to age, aren't they? I think family grouping means something different. Could you tell us what it means, please?
Family grouping basically refers to the fact that you have children of various ages in the one class. It comes from simply the fact that children in a family are of various ages and not one age. I don't like peer group classes as they are in schools at the moment. That means classes where all the children are 7. I prefer children who are a range of ages, because you get the younger ones looking up to the older ones, which provides them with lots of confidence and self-esteem. The older ones can assist the young ones and thereby practice the skills that they're developing. There's no better way to really know something than to try and teach it to somebody else. And there is also a very lovely development of consideration, a working togetherness, as opposed to continual competition, which occurs if you have same ages all the time together. If you have a group of 7-year-olds together, there can be no possibility of not comparing one to the other. The children do it, and the teacher does it, and the parents will do it, simply by virtue of the fact of the arrangement of the class, the fact that you have the same age within that class. It doesn't matter whether they are particularly competitive or not. It's just the fact that you've got the same age in the same classroom. If you have children, say, from kindergarten to 6th grade, which is a lovely way to teach, then that competition becomes irrelevant. Because what we're all here for is to learn and help each other and support each other and develop as a group. We're not here to find out who's better, because we're all different ages anyway, and that really doesn't matter. So family grouping brings out all those attributes which, if you sat down and thought about it, you would really want your child to have. Competition is a fine thing for, say, certain sports and certain activities. But on the whole, we don't want our children to be competitive on every issue that they address.
Well, really, that's the way our system works now. I mean, you can't really get the job or the spot, the TES, tertiary entrance score. Everything is pretty well on a competition, isn't it? I mean, I can't imagine a world where, it sounds fabulous, but I can't imagine how we could transpose this throughout the system. It'll take a lot of stimulated people to want to do it. Now, whether or not our education systems are interested.
Can do it. I don't know that I agree with that, Joanne. I think that basically a person gets a job on their merit and stays in a job on their merit. And in fact, even though competition exists, it exists and develops things like backstabbing and pulling the carpet rug out from under people and a whole lot of negative things that I don't really think are helpful to the functioning of Bondi Junction, Paddington, or the world in general. There will be continued competition because people like to run faster and jump higher, and that in its place is fine. I don't believe that anybody got anywhere by competing against someone else. The only competition that really is of value is the competition that you have with yourself and say, well, tomorrow I'm going to improve these things about myself. And to stay in a job and to do a job well is to be self-motivated. And if the motivation you require is by beating someone else, I think that's a bit sad. And I don't think in the long term it works.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's just that the sad facts are that when somebody's going to enter university, that there is a cut-off point and they have to have a certain mark. Nobody interviews them.
It's because interviewing is hard.
Yeah.
Basically, parents attach themselves to exam results because they're understandable.
Yeah.
But a lot of very important things happen at schools and with parents in working with children that aren't measurable or much harder. And the problem with placing a lot of emphasis on exam results is that those sorts of things get pushed to the background and the exam results become the very important part of the education.
Mm.
They're not. They serve a purpose.
The melting pot actually sorts everything out in the long run, doesn't it, really? That's really what you're saying.
I would like to see interviews for university placements. I think I can find out more from a person by sitting and talking with them than I can from looking at their exam results. Certainly I might be able to find out that they applied themselves and finished a course and achieved a reasonable result. But those results also might mean they didn't like the teacher, or the teacher liked them very much, or they particularly liked this subject, or 100 dozen other things. And exam results are like IQ scores, are a small part of the overall person and certainly don't give you a completed picture. What I would like to see schools provide is some results from standardised tests, a portfolio of activities that the child's been interested in. So for your daughter it would be painting and art. Some ideas that the child was allowed to develop about subjects, academic subjects and other subjects that they were interested in and enjoyed working on. Some discussion about the sorts of activities the child had done when the child was at school, so that I could see how their written skills were, what their interests were, and I had an idea of the general direction they were heading. And then I would like to talk with them as an interviewer and find out from them face to face about that ability. That takes time. And unfortunately, a lot of people in business say children can't spell and they can't read, and this is the outcry.
A lot of generalities.
A lot of people make those statements. But the people that are doing it, and there is the business council, and I can't remember the fellow who's the principal or the head of that group, are business people. They're not academics, they're not doctors, they're not very well qualified people. They're businessmen who work in very narrow jobs and who also compete. So that the biggest weight of criticism of schools is coming from a very narrow band of the community who don't have great intellectual skills and whose job specifications are very narrow and are indeed in this competitive area. And the criticisms that, and by virtue of the sort of job that it is, that selling type job, their perceptions are of testable things. Results are important. Whereas in the broader community, results have a place, but the way you handle people and the way you deal with people and your ability to write, which aren't able to be marked as readily, are very important as well. So what you're getting is criticism from a narrow band of the community about the school system. And on issues which form only a small part of the school system. And then all of a sudden Mr. Greiner decides that he's going to have basic skills back in schools and testing and all sorts of things, and this is the stopgap measure for that, which is a shame because schools provide a lot more than that. And what you want, if you think about it, is a well-developed, well-rounded child. And if they are well-developed and emotionally happy, and the little problems that they have resolved by a competent teacher as they come up, like mum moved house and dad's left and I need to talk to somebody about this and is this normal, and if those things are handled on a day-to-day basis, then the development of reading and writing skills comes easily. They're no problem because all the other issues are out of the way. So I think it's more important than a test result to have the development of an overall person, and I think teachers parents should be asking teachers about that overall development rather than concentrating simply on test results.
And that really takes us to you and your philosophy and your motto. And your motto is, Kathy?
Be reasonable.
Oh, well, it sounds very reasonable to me. And I notice amongst some of the information you gave me, a fair conduct code. This is your own fair conduct code, I presume, is it?
Well, the state government put out a fair conduct code, I think it was late last year, and sent it round to all the schools.
Right.
And it had lots of rules. And whenever you go to your child's school, you'll probably find a list of rules.
Yes,
in fact,
I know. We've got a booklet.
In fact, we were sent home a booklet of don'ts and do's, and mostly don'ts.
Yes, mostly don'ts.
Which is a shame, because the only rule that you need in a school is be reasonable. And if you have more rules, then all you're doing is giving the children a whole lot of ideas about what not to do.
Right.
Okay, so you've got a list.
There's a rule against that one, so let's try it out.
Well, it's even more insidious than that. It goes even deeper. If I were to say to you, look, I want you to be really careful and I want you not to lose your keys. These keys are the only set I've got, so when you're driving my car, just be really careful that you make sure you put them in a safe place. The whole time you're going out, you will be thinking about being careful and not losing these keys. And it will be on your mind. You will most probably lose them. More than likely, you will lose them.
All right, well, tell me how you can stop from losing them. I thought that would be reinforcing the fact that you shouldn't really...
Well, I wouldn't talk about losing at all. Just be careful of the keys is probably enough.
Yes.
Just continue on the positive.
I see.
But what you're really wanting from children, which is people sit down and they work out all these rules and regulations, and it's a self-defence mechanism.
It's probably a committee, Kathy.
Exactly.
You've probably got about 15 people sitting around feeding in their pet thing.
Yes, and we'll have to stop them from doing these things to us. This is our protection.
Aha, so the child, the enemy, lurks out there.
Exactly. And this is our code, and then if they do those things to us...
we can get rid of them.
We can do something about it.
We can give them an electric shock.
So rules are made up by a group of people different to the group of people that they're going to affect as a defence mechanism. And as soon as you have a rule, you take away the personal approach. As soon as you have a rule to refer to, you remove the personal contact and you can refer back to the rule and it becomes very easy. Like categorising people.
Right.
If you categorise people, then it's much easier to talk with them because you know what to expect from them. And if you have a rule and you say, well, if you break this rule, then this happens, you don't have to think when you're dealing with that child. Thinking stops. You refer back to the rule, and that's your safety shield, if you like. Be reasonable requires thinking, and it also requires that you are very committed to developing children to a certain model, which is, I want the child to think about what he's doing and how he's behaving. I want him to be reasonable. I want him to grow up and be able to make decisions relevant to the situations, etc., etc. So in my head, I have a model, a positive model of the ideal child, if you like, and my behaviour in dealing with children is as far as I can make it, going along to making that model up. So the input, the information I give is trying to go toward that ideal child. Now, I don't expect my children to be perfect, and that's not going to happen, but I would rather give them input which is more likely to achieve that than not. So if something happens, I would simply say to the child, say we take a fight situation, and two children are fighting, perhaps over a toy. The common situation in homes across Australia.
Absolutely.
One referral to rules: when you fight, you go to your rooms. So separately. Okay, so that's a common rule, household rule. Okay, or when you fight, I take away the toy. Now, the be reasonable rule, which is my only one, if you like, requires the parent to sit down and say, well, okay, tell me what happened.
And everybody tells you at once.
And people will say this and this and this. And then what you do is you try and resolve the reason for the conflict in the first place,
Right.
so that conflict doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So that you take away... And a lot of the things the children will say to you are dobbing in on other people, and they're not... he did it first, or he hit me, or I had the toy first and it wouldn't have happened. And what is required is for you to expand and develop the child's thinking so that in that situation again, should it arise, which it will, they have more behavioural options.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting is one of them, but you might say to them, okay, I will take the toy away if you fight, but if you share it, you can continue playing.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing means you can have the toy for a little while and then give it to the other person to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by a little while is when I say 5 minutes is up, and you might have to monitor it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long term, what you're doing is removing that as a point of contention forever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to happen day after day after day after day anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The 10 or 15 minutes you spend with it today, not the quick solution, the longer, but, well, explain it to me, let me hear your...
Will really work.
Will really, really work. At the end of the year, instead of having a whole lot of short solutions and a whole lot of misbehaviours building up, you will have dealt with them as they've come along, and your children will behave much better. Mm. You won't have 20 inappropriate behaviours that can happen at various times throughout the house. Maybe there'll be one that happens and you sit down and talk about it. So in the long run, it does save you time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So discussing it with the children, providing them with more options. Next time they're in the situation, they can think about it and choose a suitable option. Now, they might choose fight, and then you might have to say, well, okay, if that happens, what do we decide would occur?
Mm.
Is that what you want to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting them to think. And that's really what you want them to do. You don't want children that'll obey rules when they're, all the time. You don't want robotic people that'll say yes, no, and just go along with a rule system. You want people who'll think.
Mm.
And you have to think as a parent.
That's right. And so really what you're doing is not only getting the child to think, or you are also assisting the parents in seeing that this is the direction you, Kathy Brown, educator, that's the direction from which you're coming.
Yes.
And really you're hoping that, and as a matter of fact, and I know too, that you're developing a really responsible human being, and surely that's what we're all on about, is that if we all take a bit of responsibility for our actions in what we're doing and how we're behaving, then surely we're going to have a much happier life. We're going to be able to infuse goodwill and happiness around us, and that's really what we're on about, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where you're coming from.
Well, Let's Learn is about happier parent-child relations.
Hmm.
All of this, the big secret is, if you want happy children, pay attention to them.
Hmm. Hmm. Well,
They're cheap.
They're cheap?
No, paying attention is cheap. It doesn't involve you in doing anything except believing that paying attention is an important thing. Some children need more and less, but
yes.
Paying attention to children is really important. It's interesting to go down to the beach or to a swimming pool. I think I spoke about this once before. And parents are with their children, but they're not paying attention to their children.
They want their children to just go away and let them lie there and be on their own in their own space.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that is not really what happens when you have little children. You can't just switch off.
Well, switching off, being with your children is a different thing to paying attention. You can't be with them. What they need is the attention. There's two distinct things there. And one good way of working with children and attention is paying attention is for instance, when you're driving the car, is to talk about how the car works. I mean, it's a sanity saver too, but you are talking to the child, and the child is aware that you're talking to the child, and from very young, they can hear your voice, and they believe that you're paying attention to them because you're talking to them.
Right.
So a continual talking about using the vacuum cleaner, and how a child will be very interested to hear about it, will take it in, and if you talk to them in a complex fashion, even when they're very young, that information is stored in some fashion. And increasing IQ, if you like, or raising more intelligent children is based on
them becoming aware of you being there.
Aware, and also finding out about things that provide them with information that they can tack onto later. So the vacuum cleaner is a very interesting one. As you're vacuuming, you're talking about how there's an engine inside the vacuum cleaner, and causes suction to come through the long tube up into the vacuum cleaner, and how you plug it in and switch it on. And I find that has a very calming effect on me as a parent, much like singing to children.
Well, it's sharing, isn't it? You're sharing your vacuuming experience.
Exactly.
And that becomes an interesting thing then. You're interacting.
So you can actually calm yourself down by talking in a reasonably adult fashion to your very young child. And in fact, some studies have been done that show that very bright children have developed from that parental complex talk from a very young age. So that these children who are well balanced and well adjusted, as the mother's been vacuuming or cleaning, there's been a great deal of discussion about exactly what's happening, even in a very complex way. So fathers who are very interested in cars can quite happily talk to their very young sons about that, and some of that information will go in and is stored. In fact, all of it is stored. All of it is stored.
And I guess it all comes under one great big 4-letter word called love. And love is a many splendid thing. Kathy, thank you for being here on my program today. It's been really fantastic. You've been listening to Kathy Brown, and we've been talking about new ways of learning to love your child, learning to be loving parents, and to help with that in that all-important area of education, and helping them to fit into the world, the optimum world. So thank you, Kathy, for being here with me.
Thank you, Joanne. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.